Good afternoon, good morning, good night, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Aidan Walker, the Program Director of Design China Beijing Forum, wishing I could be with you in Beijing, but here I am on the south coast of England in my country home, a mere 10,000 miles away from all the action. Nonetheless, it's still my pleasure to introduce a really good number of outstanding international speakers for you throughout these 4 days. In fact, it's because of doing it by video and being able to send different people's messages from wherever they are in the world, we actually have more international speakers on the Beijing program than is normal. And in this particular case, it is my great pleasure to introduce Peter Ippolito of the Ippolito Flights Group. Peter's main base is in Stuttgart, Germany, and that's where he speaks to you from. And I would tell you that I think that the overall feel of Peter's approach to design is very much like a philosopher. He's a deep thinker. The title of his talk is Transformations: How to Give Value to People in a World of the Instant Image and Instant Perfection, which in itself is arguable. But he says things like, there's a growing sense of disembodiment, there's a shift in the way we put value on things. His group works in all sorts of different design categories. They work in residential, in leisure, in retail, and in workplace. But always underneath there's this underlying theme about how we can give value to people's experience. He talks a lot about the post-COVID experience, and there is everything to listen to, ladies and gentlemen, in Peter Ippolito.
Hi, my name is Peter Ippolito from Ippolito Flights Group. Unfortunately, I cannot be with you today, so I'm talking to you via video from our head office in Stuttgart, Germany. Today I want to talk a little bit about transformations, and sure, we are in times of big transformations. Now, as we as designers are being shaped by our society, as much as we are a crucial part of shaping our society with our work, I think it's a good time to reflect a little bit on what those transformations mean for us in our profession, how we look at our role as designers and to our work. So the experience of digitalization not only changed the way how we live, how we work, and how we communicate, but it certainly changed as well the way how we interact with our environment. Not only our built environment, but our social environment as well. So here we are, consuming images, stories, opinions, opportunities, lifestyles, and it's a blessing and it's a curse at the same time. And the tricky thing is, the more we consume, the shorter the expiry date becomes of all these images and ideas and opportunities. And the more we consume stories, the less own stories we seem to have. So where does that leave us? Between self-realization, an explosion of choices, and on the other side, a sense of loss of orientation and being totally overwhelmed, and the need of constantly reflecting how to put ourselves in this very, very complex world with a constant acceleration. Now, no wonder that there's a yearning for orientation, stability, and meaning. And at the same time, we'll have to deal with the fact that there are no facts anymore. That the certainties of our former generations, of our parents, who grew up with values and opinions which are strong and absolute, become relative. We're in a world where a constant acceleration kind of makes all boundaries blurry. So it leaves us in a situation where we all want to define ourselves of who we are, where we are, and the moment of identity becomes such a big importance. Now, the more we consume our digital content, the more we'll have a growing sense of disembodiment. So we reflect about who we are in the world and want to make sure that we don't get lost. So here we are taking pictures of ourselves, the selfie moment, creating beautiful, composed, iconic images about who we are, or better, who we think the others should perceive us. And of course, appearance becomes a big issue. You know, am I going to look good? Am I worked out enough? What kind of clothes am I wearing? Am I beautiful enough? So all these questions about the how become much more important than the what. And there's a shift here. There's a shift in how we put values in things. So former generations put values in things. Today, there's more value in the act of consuming rather than having something. As much as we are, you know, having the shift which is long discussed between a knowledge society to information society. So we're living in a lifestyle society where we define ourselves rather more in the products we buy than in the things we have. And communication happens more and more in a way of symbols and of icons. And but this is a tricky part, because in a very speedy globalized world of images which are flooding us, images become exchangeable. And things which are exchangeable don't carry necessarily value. So here's an image of Hillary Clinton in the last presidential race. So you see 2006, everybody wanted to talk to her, touch her, get an autograph from her. 10 years later, same situation, again the presidential race. Nobody wanted to touch her, nobody wanted to interact with her. They only use her as a backdrop of sharing that moment of being with her in the same room. Now that's scary, because the experience that you are at a certain place becomes only a backdrop of self-assertion. It's not about being there, it's about sharing that you've been there. So then I was visiting the Marina Bay Sands in Singapore, and obviously you would go up and spend a little fortune to visit the pool and have that beautiful vista onto the city. So you go up there and there's a pool, like a bathtub, 200 people, of which 180 people having a phone in their hand and taking a selfie. And that kind of made me thinking, what is the value of what we're doing here? What's the value of all these billions of dollars they spent there in producing this iconic architecture which is communicated all over the world, when it just becomes a backdrop for sharing an experience you could have had if you wouldn't have been busy to take the picture and share it. So the place becomes a backdrop for self-presentation. And what does it mean for the value of the things we're doing as a designer? Are we only creating backdrops for self-assertion? And there's no secret that a lot of our clients, not only in China, give us the briefing to produce iconic images rather than a space. It's a series of images which are Instagrammable or easy to share on WeChat, because that's important for the commercial success. So I think these are really important questions, because they reflect on how can we be sustainable if it's more about consuming places rather than using places. How can we be sustainable in our work and making something relevant for people's lives if we learn in our digital experience that there's every second a new experience, and with that kind of idea and with that hunger for experience, we'll go to places and we'll expect exactly the same thing. What does it mean for us as designers if there's no place for growth anymore and to have something slowly established? Instead, we learn that everything has to be perfect right now, instantly. So there's a looking for an instant moment of satisfaction. And I think the answer for all these questions is complex, and there's no easy answer. But certainly it's about values. It's about what kind of value can we bring to the life of the people. Now this is being questioned hardly with our COVID experience. And that experience now, how we present ourselves, is being challenged, of course, with the fact that we can't travel anymore right now, that we'll have to cover our face with masks. So it's even more difficult to reflect about your feelings and who you are and interaction, and that the sense of being together somewhere, which is, you know, in our very nature as social animals, as we are as humans, becomes a very complex procedure of balancing out a sense of community and a sense of staying healthy because you just have to keep the social distancing. So placemaking, value, belonging, appropriation are at the core of what we think we should look at designers, rather than quick images. And what I try to do now for the next couple of minutes is reflect a little bit on our projects, our take on these questions, where I think, as again, there's no easy answer to that. The first I want to emphasize is very easy, and it's pretty obvious, but I think it's worth talking about it. It's people. You know, we are working for people. It's people business. And so all our projects are only committed to the user. You know, user centricity is at the core of what we do. And I'll show you a couple of examples. Here's a jewelry brand, which we designed a couple of years ago in China. And instead of presenting objects, it's presenting really an experience, taking the girl away in all her desires of wanting to be beautiful, finding a lover and a husband, and making her own jewelry by herself. So there's a world, rather than presenting the jewelry encounters in a product-driven presentation. It's a presentation which is driven by experience. So you can browse through that kind of magic forest of things. You'll see butterflies flying through the store. It's a space very feminine, very wide, where you discover things rather than there's things being presented to you. So it's about you finding things rather than here is the jewelry you should have. It's about finding value in things you discover and you can assemble by yourself. So you end up in the customer journey at a little vanity table where you can sit together with your friend and put together your jewelry yourself. The space itself is very feminine, a lot of details, a lot of ideas about being presented about how you could use the jewelry, but at the end it's about always coming back to you and about how you feel and how you want to express yourself. All the details are talking about that kind of yearning for elegance, for femininity, and it's a beautiful, consistent customer journey, which not only ends at the big picture, but it goes really into the detail. We'll think a lot in our projects about appropriation. So the question really is, how do we put value in things for our users? And I think the difference is between presenting something which you know it's beautiful and you should be in awe, and owning it. And we want our projects to be owned by our users. So how do you make a space which is not only another story you consume and you'll forget in a split of a second, but it's something you connect to, you own it, you're part of it. And there's a couple of strategies we use in our work, which I want to present to you. So the question of appropriation, of course, the easiest way to solve this is in a very basic idea of everything you discover yourself, you own it. So everything which is being presented to you, you might like it, you might not like it, but everything you discover by yourself, you own it. So what we try to do are to do spaces, like the sample apartment here in Shanghai, which you never get tired of looking at things, and you need to conquer it by walking through it, and it opens always a new perspective. So here it's an apartment. In this case, it's an apartment which is called Shades of Grey. It's layered in a very contemplative way, in the same time very exciting way, in layers of grey, from matte to glossy, from transparent to opaque, from soft to hard, from dark to bright, from textured to unicolor. And you never can get everything. So we hate spaces which are being totally transparent from the door and you understood everything. Our spaces, we try to give the user a journey where they can discover things by themselves, and then you'll own it because you connect it with your own stories. Now, residential design is pretty interesting now in COVID times, as people don't need to work at home in the office anymore. So home office becomes a much more vivid part of our work-life experience. So this is interesting, as in a lot of apartments for the past years, in China especially, we threw out the study because work became mobile. So you'll work with your notebook on the sofa, on the dining table. Now with the COVID experience, where people more and more might work remote, the study becomes a little bit more an important feature again, and so we'll rediscover that. And as people spend more times at home, I think residential design is going to be a very interesting part of our work for the next years. As we can see, just for the past month, at least in Europe, the furniture sales were very high because people spent a lot of time at home, so they were reflecting on in which space they are spending their time at. Now, the second part of appropriation is, of course, memory. We try to produce images, and so in our industry, there's a lot talking about storytelling. We don't like that term that much because we think storytelling is pretty boring. If I can tell you a story, you might like it. There's a big chance that you don't like it. So instead of telling you a story, we'll try to start a story. So our architectures are about images and quite often collages which are not quite defined. They're giving you a hint of a desire, of an image, of something you can connect to with your own memory. Rather telling you the full story and saying the architect meant to say ba ba ba, it's about a field of opportunities to connect to this place with your own story, being triggered from your subjective and collective memory. Now, all our clients and all our users are different. So there's another way of appropriation is doing something very specifically for your client. So here's another sample apartment in Shanghai, which looks totally different. It's vibrant, it's young, it's object-driven, it's bold colors. And again, I don't want to talk too much about the project, but you'll see it's a totally different energy. And I think it's really worthwhile, as simple as it is. If you look at our projects, they're all different because our clients are different. They're coming from different backgrounds, they have different stories, they have different memories, they have different ideas about how they live and how they work. So yes, they get a very different place which we're going to design. And I think this is a beautiful and important moment, not for us as designers. It gives us the whole width of life, and that's what we're doing. We're designing the environment for life for our users, but it gives value to people which are different, and everybody deserves an individual answer to that. So in our studio, we'll take a lot of care that we don't give like schematic answers, but we'll really take much care, and again, the word care is very important, that will give answers which really connect to our users. And lastly, the world is changing, not only in the way how we live, but in the way how we work. So we're all concerned now, even more with COVID, to stay healthy. So from organizing a space to a space where I want to be and I'm feeling healthy, so we call it health-based design, it's a big step, and I think it's a very important step, not only out of sustainable reasons, but just about the feeling that everybody has an interest to work and live in a very healthy environment. So this is an example of an office we just finished in Germany. We brought in 3,000 plants, which is not only beautiful because it's an idea of nature, but it has a factual effect on how people experience that space. So we have 40% more humidity in the space without changing MEP, which leads to 50% lower sick rate in the studio, which leads to 25% more efficiency. And that's a proven fact that looking at plants is not only good for the climate in the space, but it increases the efficiency because we connect to small details, and it lets our view go wider and deeper, right? So taking care of well-being in our space is an integral part of dealing with the user. Courage. Now these are interesting times, and I think they need well thought and bold answers. And sometimes it's very visible and sometimes they're only small things. But I think what we just said is it's a very fluid environment we're in. The world is very fluid. So we're looking in answers which we have to learn might not be A or B. It's not this or that. It might be something in between. So hybrid solutions which are easy to adapt to situations not only now in COVID times where we don't know yet where does this lead us in our experience about traveling, about interaction, about hygiene in a place, but in our lifelong use of our objects, adaptability and an openness in use, I think is a key component of what we have to look into. Now, I'll show you a couple of examples. This is a pizza place. We designed it in Germany. And so the interesting thing was that first, the client didn't want to involve in a classic pizza. You can eat a classic pizza as well, but it starts already with a moment that you'll find pizzas there with all kind of weird components. And you can eat pizza from early morning breakfast pizza to late night. The second thing is you share the pizza. So you're being served with scissors. So this whole sharing society is being translated into the product itself, where you'll be invited to have all these very beautiful presented pizzas, and they're being shared with scissors. So we created a space which is not a classic pizza, but it's a collage about a place which is a breakfast place, which is a pizza restaurant, which is a bar, and so it is something which you can't quite put your finger on, but it's always active. It's not inside, it's not outside. It's a place of a collage. And again, it comes back to appropriation. Collage gives us the moment to have one object and another object, and they apparently don't have anything to do with it, but you're looking at those things and you connect them with your memories. And so you put in your own story. So here's a collage of ideas of Italy in the 1960s, of terraces, of American billboards, about beautiful girls jumping onto the record player, about bikini girls dancing on the table, rockets, colors, which are all very sensual, and they're all telling a little bit of surreal story about Italy with a memory of what a pizza in Naples could have tasted in the 60s, but now it's being in a contemporary setting, which, as I said, is between a cocktail bar, a breakfast place, and a classic restaurant. It's busy all day. This is a project we're working on right now. It's a sales center, and so it took courage by the client to make a unique place, and that's what we're looking in a lot of projects, creating a unique place which is totally modular. And so, yes, in order to be sustainable, we need to be modular, we need to be prefab, we need to be able to be very smart about how we build things, but you don't want to see it. So the challenge is to create places which have all the intensity of a unique space and at the same time being created in a super modular way. We're looking at that in sales centers, we're looking at that as a lot in workplace design, how we roll out systems which are highly effective and efficient, but at the same time putting all the care and all the love to the people who are using them and giving them not a feeling that they are exchangeable in what they're doing and what they're looking for here in a sales center, but it's really counting about their experience, their dreams, and their hopes for their future. Or here's an example, we just designed and we finished the design for a carpet collection for Object Carpet, which is a large carpet manufacturer. And so we wanted to present, obviously, the collection in Milan this year. COVID stopped us. So we had to rethink how we're going to market and present that collection to the audience. So we came up in a collaboration with Monica Menes, who's a famous photographer here in Germany, to create a mock-up situation and choreograph a surreal situation of storytelling, which is reflecting the idea of the new pleasure in textiles, which we want to communicate with our collection, which deals about making something serial and making something industrial, which looks handmade. So teaching the manufacturer, who is bound to do perfect things, how to make a mistake by default and how to express that. And so we ended up with a set of beautiful photographs, a fantastic movie, which I invite you to look at. And with a 3D space, you can navigate through and get all the information in the interactive way to learn about the collection. So we'll have to rethink how we define spaces in a virtual way when the physical experience might not be possible. And of course, the the whole idea about how we redefine or reuse the built environment which is around us. Not only because the city and its use is changing. So we have this situation here. This is a project we did for Soho in Shanghai. It's a former department store which is transformed into a co-working space. But now with COVID, a lot of typologies, especially in retail, might not survive. Department stores, at least in Europe and in America, are going to have a hard time surviving. So we have these vast areas in the inner cities which will looking for new use. And again, it comes to the idea of how can we revive, how can we bring back work, life, fun, entertainment, culture into the places and interact with the city, not only in a commercial sense, but in a sense to make the cities a lively place of communication and a community. So, and lastly, this is a project we are working on right now in southern China about a mall project, which is a very hybrid things about consumerism, shopping, culture, work, hotel, residential, inside and outside, and we're very, very looking forward to working on that project. Now, as we said before, purpose becomes such an important question of what we do, defining ourselves. Who are we? Why are we doing that? And of course, there is a shift into the younger generation, which kind of puts different importance on the question of what are they doing, because they feel with all that consumerism, they kind of get lost in the question of why am I here and what do I change with my life? And so the question, the yearning for purpose and meaning becomes a big driver of what we do, and I think it's a fantastic situation because it opens up again a discussion about value and what do we do with our projects. And I want to present a couple of projects which are dealing with that. So as we said, working and the working environment is changing dramatically. So 10 years ago, 20 years ago, we pretty much organized desks. Today, we're organizing communication and community. Now with COVID, that changes again, because a lot of workspace, which is about concentration and about working on your desk, might not be there anymore because it might be remote, whether it's at home or in other places in the city. So the question leaves for a lot of our clients, and we do a lot of workplace projects, is why do I build a headquarters? And the answer is simple. Everything, so the new headquarters is going to be a temple of purpose and value, right? It's about creating a place, and that's not only for workplace, that's for pretty much all the projects we're doing. It's about creating places of experience where people want to be rather than they need to be. So here in this case, this is a paint manufacturer in Germany, a typical hidden champion. You wouldn't know the brand, but they're working globally for the car industry, and they put up a new headquarters. And so it's not only about a new building, but it's about how they do things. This is like in the countryside in Germany, so it's a rather conservative surrounding. And here is the owner putting up a building, super transparent, and making a bold move, not only in hiring us, and we transformed that whole view at night, communicating what the company is about color, so you'll see that at first glance with all these different ceilings elements, but in making a decision that the ground floor is not about representation, but it's about sharing an experience about what the company is about in the cafeteria. So you'll see the cafeteria as a central part where clients, visitors, people working in the office and people working in the factory meet. And I think this is a very beautiful place, and they'll take care about the quality of the space. So this is not about feeding your staff. This is about a place of communication, a place for the brand, about working all day in a place. And of course you can eat for lunch there and for dinner, and you'll have a coffee place, but basically, and that's a common experience we all have as humans, the party is always the nicest in the kitchen. So where people get food and drinks, they want to communicate. So this represents the shift in coming from a place where it's all about the efficiency of the desk organization into an organization where it's about the efficiency and the inviting and embedded in values and purpose of the company situation of enabling interaction. And I might say that the unplanned interaction is always the most important. So everything you plan, of course, this needs to happen, but innovation happens in unplanned ways. And so we'll see not only in the architecture a big and strong move from the organized into the informal, into enabling enabling interaction, which are not planned, but we'll see a big move, and I think that's very important, from a situation where we've been in the past and still in the present about command and control, moving into a way of management processes and an organizational form which is about power and engage. So how to give people a sense of purpose, that they're here and what they can contribute, what they can decide, how they as a team create a collaborative success. Or this is another example of a resort, a hotel we're planning right now. It's in the countryside in Germany, close to Berlin. And the interesting thing is it's about 20 little pavilions we're creating, but they create like a typical typology of a village. You see that little circle down there. And we're reusing our old farm building. So this is the community building where you're being welcomed, where you can cook together, where you do events, have a bar, play music, play games. But the interesting thing is that not only that the resort creates an idea of a village within the countryside, picking up on a traditional layout of villages in that area, but it is being an open concept for the village next to that resort, which doesn't have a square, to use that area as the square for the village. So there's an interaction between a typical enclosed idea of a hotel and being open to people from the outside to use that for the Christmas market and other things. So even the place where you get married is going to be in that resort. So again, it's a hybrid idea about community, not only when you're there between the guests, but community to reach out really into the place where we create this this resort. So you'll see how it's embedded into the landscape, which is a very natural setting, very rural, and then the hotel rooms, which are open to the sky, and you can be part of a generous experience of nature for the whole day. Here, a sales center in China, again, where we don't sell apartments per se. Of course, we're selling apartments, but we're selling more an idea about being connected to nature, embracing the nature. You're looking out in the sales center, being at a place which is much more about art and transcending an idea of lifestyle into a feeling of generosity and ideas, rather than being a hardcore sales center in communicating only the project. Or here another one in Qingdao, located at the beach, and translating that energy of a maritime lifestyle into something very sensual, sharing experience about what it means to live along the sea and doing that together. So I think hybrid moments are a big part of our future work, and as I said, the in-between becomes a more and more interesting part, which doesn't mean that you don't have an opinion, but I think we have to learn that ambiguity is not a problem but a chance. That finding defining spaces which are, as I said, adaptable, which have multiple truths, which allow multiple readings, which allow multiple perspectives on them, allow not only a sustainable use of that project, but allow a lot of people to connect those spaces and put value and connect with their lives, with their ideas to them. So it all boils down to identity. And at the end, I just wanted to show you a little bit images of our studio here in Germany, our head studio where I'm located right now, because it kind of reflects quite nicely, I think, the idea of a collage, of putting together different areas with different energies, and they seemingly don't belong to each other, but at the same time, they make a big picture. And I think that's a big part of our work, collecting all these images, being not afraid to collaging them, opening up stories in the head of our users, allowing them to connect emotionally and rationally, read them on different levels, inviting them to conquer them, to discover them, giving them a sense that we'll care about the details, that you'll touch underneath the table, that somebody took care that this is a nice experience, and that translates, of course, in the idea you have about, you know, the owner of the space. That's our material lab and our workshop. We have a fantastic material library, and that, you know, not only the big gesture counts, but in this case, for example, this is our guest toilet, that the toilets count as well. The unimportant spaces are as important than the important spaces. So that identity in its constant movement, in its constant redefinition about the question which we all have, you know, who am I and what do the others think of me, and to match that moment with architecture which is not moving, which is constant, requires an architecture which is open for stories and a perception which can be flexible, which can be moving. And so with that, I think I'd like to say that, yes, we're living in a hyper complicated and hyper complex times, and I think it's beautiful. I think life is complex and we have to embrace it. And I think that's the most beautiful thing in our profession, that we can work with that joy of life in all its diversity and just doing it. Thank you very much.